The power of habit is not just about breaking bad habits. It's about understanding the hidden system that controls nearly 40% of what we do every day. If you want to become more productive, change your behavior, and redesign your life, this book is essential. Written in 2012 by Charles Duhigg, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, the book quickly became a global bestseller and transformed how individuals, companies, and organizations think about behavior change. Duhigg wrote it after years of researching neuroscience, psychology, and real-world case studies, from Olympic athletes to global corporations. If you've ever wondered why change feels so hard and how some people transform their lives completely, this book reveals the science behind it. In this video, I'll break down the entire book chapter by chapter, covering every major idea and principle explained in The Power of Habit. You'll learn how habits actually work, why they control so much of our daily behavior, and how individuals, companies, and societies can intentionally change them. By the end of this summary, you'll clearly understand the habit loop, keystone habits, the science of behavior change, and practical strategies to redesign your routines. In short, you'll walk away with the core lessons of the entire book without missing any key insight. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg is structured into 3 major parts with 9 main chapters. Let's break down one by one. Part 1. The Habits of Individuals. Chapter 1. The Habit Loop. The core principle of this chapter is that every habit follows a simple neurological pattern called the habit loop, which consists of 3 parts: cue, routine, reward. Once this loop forms, the brain begins to run the behavior automatically, allowing us to perform actions with very little conscious thought. Psychologically, this process happens in a part of the brain called the basal ganglia, which stores automatic behaviors. When a habit loop is established, the brain stops fully engaging in decision-making and instead runs the routine almost on autopilot. This is why habits can feel so powerful and difficult to change. To illustrate this, Charles Duhigg shares the story of Eugene Pauly, a man who suffered severe brain damage that erased his ability to form new memories. Surprisingly, even though Eugene could not remember events from minutes earlier, he was still able to develop new habits. Over time, he learned to walk around his neighborhood and return home automatically, even though he had no memory of learning the route. His brain had stored the routine as a habit. The lesson from this story is powerful. Habits operate independently of conscious memory. Once the loop is formed, behavior can continue even when awareness is gone. In real life, this means that to change a habit, you must identify the cue, understand the routine, and redesign the reward. For example, if stress, cue, triggers social media scrolling, routine, for relaxation, reward, you could replace the routine with a short walk while keeping the same reward. Takeaway: every habit is built on a loop, and once you understand the loop, you gain the power to change it. Chapter 2. The Craving Brain. The core principle of this chapter is that habits become powerful when the brain begins to crave the reward. It's not just the cue or the routine that drives behavior, it's the anticipation of the reward that makes the habit loop stick. Psychologically, cravings create a neurological signal that motivates action. When the brain expects a reward, it releases dopamine, a chemical linked to motivation and pleasure. Over time, the brain starts associating the cue itself with the reward, creating a powerful urge to perform the routine. This is why certain triggers, like the smell of coffee or the notification sound on your phone, can instantly push you toward a habitual action. Charles Duhigg illustrates this idea through the story of Pepsodent and its creator, Claude C. Hopkins. In the early 1900s, most Americans didn't brush their teeth regularly. Hopkins created a marketing campaign that introduced the idea of a film forming on teeth during the day. The cue became the feeling of that film, the routine was brushing with Pepsodent, and the reward was the refreshing tingling sensation left by the toothpaste. That tingling feeling created a craving that made people want to brush every day. The lesson here is that successful habits rely on creating a strong craving for the reward. Once people begin to anticipate that reward, the habit loop becomes automatic and hard to break. In real life, this principle can help you build better habits. For example, if you want to develop a reading habit, pair it with an enjoyable reward, like a cup of your favorite tea. Over time, your brain will start craving the relaxing experience associated with reading. Takeaway: habits stick when the brain learns to crave the reward, turning simple routines into powerful, automatic behaviors. Chapter 3: The Golden Rule of Habit Change. The core principle of this chapter is what Charles Duhigg calls the golden rule of habit change. You can't extinguish a bad habit, you can only change it. To transform a habit, you must keep the old cue, deliver the old reward, but insert a new routine. Psychologically, this works because habits are deeply ingrained in the basal ganglia. Simply telling yourself, "Don't do this," rarely works. The cue triggers an urge that demands a response. By replacing the routine rather than resisting the cue, the brain can satisfy the craving in a new, healthier way, keeping the neurological loop intact. Duhigg illustrates this with the story of Tony Dungy, whose coaching philosophy turned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from a losing team into a championship contender. Dungy noticed that players with destructive habits, like reacting aggressively under pressure, were hurting the team. Instead of punishing them, he implemented new routines to respond differently in high-stress moments, while keeping the cues and rewards familiar. Over time, players' automatic reactions changed, demonstrating the power of habit replacement. The lesson from this story is clear: willpower alone is insufficient. Lasting change requires strategic habit restructuring. By focusing on the routine rather than trying to eliminate the behavior, transformation becomes achievable. In real life, this can be applied to everyday habits. For instance, if you tend to snack on junk food when stressed, identify the stress cue, replace the routine with a short walk or a healthy snack, and ensure the reward, stress relief, is still satisfied. Over time, the new habit will feel automatic. Takeaway: the golden rule of habit change shows that real transformation comes not from suppression, but from substitution, keeping the cue and reward, changing the routine. Part 2: The Habits of Successful Organizations. Chapter 4: Keystone Habits, or The Ballad of Paul O'Neill. The core principle of this chapter is that some habits have the power to start a chain reaction, changing other behaviors and transforming entire organizations. Duhigg calls these keystone habits, small routines that trigger widespread positive change beyond the habit itself. Psychologically, keystone habits work because they create structure, momentum, and a sense of accountability. When one key habit changes, it reshapes how people think, interact, and make decisions. They also often influence organizational culture by encouraging other beneficial behaviors to emerge naturally. The chapter illustrates this through the story of Paul O'Neill, who became CEO of Alcoa in 1987. When O'Neill took over, the company was struggling with safety issues and low productivity. Instead of immediately focusing on profits, he made worker safety the keystone habit. He insisted that every injury be reported and investigated, changing routines across every level of the company. This single habit had ripple effects. Communication improved, employees felt empowered to make decisions, and productivity increased. Over time, Alcoa's profits soared, not because of direct financial strategies, but because the keystone habit transformed the organizational culture. The lesson is clear: identify and focus on keystone habits to drive meaningful change. For individuals, a keystone habit could be exercising regularly. It often leads to eating better, being more productive, and improving personal discipline. For organizations, a keystone habit can be any practice that sets standards and expectations that naturally influence other behaviors.
In real life, the key is to look for habits that create a domino effect, amplifying positive results beyond the initial action. Takeaway: keystone habits aren't just habits, they're catalysts for widespread change, capable of transforming both individuals and entire organizations.
Chapter 5: Starbucks and the Habit of Success. The core principle of this chapter is that willpower itself is a habit that can be trained. Duhigg shows how successful individuals and organizations deliberately cultivate routines that strengthen self-discipline, enabling people to succeed even under stress. Psychologically, willpower is like a muscle. It can be depleted with overuse, but strengthened with practice. By turning acts of self-control into habits, individuals no longer rely solely on motivation or fleeting determination. They develop automatic routines that guide behavior, even in challenging situations. Duhigg illustrates this with the story of Starbucks. In the 1990s, Starbucks faced the challenge of serving millions of customers while training employees to handle stress without losing composure. They implemented a program to build willpower habits, such as teaching employees how to manage frustration, defer gratification, and respond calmly to difficult customers. Over time, these habits became ingrained, making employees more resilient and capable of consistently providing high-quality service. The lesson from this story is that success often depends not on innate talent, but on the habits that cultivate self-discipline. By embedding willpower into everyday routines, people and organizations can handle pressure without breaking down. In real life, this principle can be applied in many ways. Start small by creating simple routines that require self-control, such as making your bed every morning, planning your day, or practicing mindful pauses before reacting. Over time, these routines strengthen your ability to handle bigger challenges automatically. Takeaway: willpower isn't just a trait, it's a habit. By turning self-discipline into routines, you can navigate stress, make better decisions, and achieve long-term success. Chapter 6: The Power of a Crisis. The core principle of this chapter is that crises create opportunities to reshape organizational habits. Duhigg explains that when routines are disrupted, people become more receptive to change, allowing leaders to introduce new behaviors that can transform an organization. Psychologically, crises break the automaticity of habitual behavior. The usual cues and routines are disrupted, creating a window where the brain is more attentive and open to learning. Leaders who recognize this can guide organizations to adopt new, more productive habits that persist even after the crisis ends. Duhigg illustrates this principle with the story of Alcoa during a safety crisis. When a catastrophic accident occurred at one of its plants, CEO Paul O'Neill used the moment to reinforce safety as a core habit. The crisis made employees pay attention in a way they wouldn't have during routine operations. By focusing everyone's energy on safety, reporting incidents, and analyzing risks, Alcoa not only prevented future accidents, but also improved overall productivity and morale. Another example comes from Target, which used a market shift crisis to identify key shopping habits of customers. By understanding and responding to those habits, the company gained a competitive advantage and increased sales during uncertain times. The lesson is clear. Crises disrupt routines, creating the perfect environment for habit transformation. Leaders who recognize these moments and introduce targeted changes can permanently shift organizational behavior for the better. In real life, this principle can be applied personally as well. When facing a major life disruption like moving to a new city, starting a new job, or recovering from illness, you can use the disruption to build new positive habits while old, unhelpful ones are naturally weakened. Takeaway: crisis isn't just danger, it's an opportunity to remake habits for both individuals and organizations if you act intentionally. Part 3: The Habits of Societies. Chapter 7: How Target Knows What You Want Before You Do. The core principle of this chapter is that habits are not just personal, they shape entire communities and markets. By analyzing patterns of behavior, organizations can predict actions and influence decisions, often before individuals consciously realize their own habits. Psychologically, human behavior is highly predictable when routines are repeated consistently. Companies leverage data analytics and habit research to detect patterns in purchasing, media consumption, and daily activities. When cues and rewards are understood, businesses can anticipate cravings and nudge consumers towards certain behaviors. Duhigg illustrates this with the story of Target, which developed a predictive analytics system to identify customers' buying habits. One notable example involved expectant mothers. By analyzing purchase patterns, Target could determine which women were likely pregnant even before they had shared the news publicly. By sending coupons for baby products at the right time, Target influenced shopping habits and secured customer loyalty. The lesson here is twofold. First, habits create predictable behaviors that can be measured and analyzed. Second, understanding these patterns allows both organizations and individuals to make intentional choices. Awareness is key. Habits can be influenced externally, but recognizing them empowers you to take control of your own routines. In real life, this principle can help you design environments that reinforce positive habits. For example, if you want to eat healthier, surround yourself with nutritious food, cue, have easy meal prep routines, routine, and reward yourself with enjoyment or convenience. Conversely, awareness of external influences like targeted ads or social pressures can help you resist habits that don't serve your goals. Takeaway: habits aren't private, they're patterns that can be analyzed, predicted, and influenced, highlighting both the power and responsibility that come with understanding human behavior.
Chapter 8: Saddleback Church and the Montgomery Bus Boycott. The core principle of this chapter is that social habits, habits embedded in groups, can drive large-scale change. While individual habits shape personal behavior, social routines influence communities, organizations, and even social movements. Understanding these patterns allows leaders to harness collective power for meaningful transformation. Psychologically, humans are wired for social reinforcement. Group habits are maintained through peer pressure, shared norms, and mutual accountability. When enough people adopt a routine, it becomes self-sustaining, creating a network of habits that can change behavior across a community. Duhigg illustrates this with two compelling stories. First, Saddleback Church. The church used small group meetings to create social habits that encouraged volunteerism, giving, and personal growth. By embedding routines in the group context, individuals were more likely to maintain new behaviors because the social structure supported them. The second example is the Montgomery bus boycott. Here, social habits fueled a massive civil rights movement. African Americans in Montgomery coordinated daily routines, such as walking instead of riding buses, sharing rides, and maintaining communication. These habits spread through community networks, reinforcing commitment and accountability. What started as individual decisions became a collective force for social change. The lesson is clear. Social habits embedded in groups are powerful tools for transformation. Leaders and activists can leverage social routines to build momentum, encourage participation, and sustain movements over time. In real life, you can apply this principle by surrounding yourself with people who reinforce positive habits. For instance, joining a study group, fitness community, or professional network can help you adopt and maintain behaviors that might be difficult to sustain alone. Social accountability amplifies personal discipline. Takeaway: social habits are the engine of collective change. When individuals adopt and reinforce routines together, they can transform communities, organizations, and even society itself.
Chapter 9: The Neurology of Free Will. The core principle of this chapter is that habits influence behavior, but individuals still have the power to choose how they respond. While habits shape much of what we do automatically,
Awareness and deliberate decision-making allow us to exercise control over critical actions. Psychologically, habits operate largely in the basal ganglia, but the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning and self-control, remains active. This means that while routine behaviors can run on autopilot, humans retain the capacity for conscious intervention, particularly in moments of crisis or moral choice. Duhigg illustrates this principle with the story of Brian Thomas. Thomas had a routine of pressing the wrong button, which led to a catastrophic accident. While habits dictated his behavior, his story highlights that awareness and intervention could have prevented disaster. Conversely, people can exercise willpower and decision-making to override harmful routines, proving that free will operates even within the framework of habitual behavior. The lesson is profound. Habits do not strip away responsibility. Understanding the mechanics of habits, cues, routines, and rewards allows individuals to recognize when to intervene, consciously change behavior, and prevent negative outcomes. In real life, this principle empowers us to examine our daily routines, identify automatic behaviors that may be harmful, and consciously replace them with constructive alternatives. For example, if anger is a habitual response to stress, pausing to breathe or journal before reacting can prevent escalation and build emotional resilience over time. Takeaway: habits shape much of what we do, but free will allows us to intervene, choose, and redirect our behavior, turning awareness into a powerful tool for personal and social change.
Core Insights Recap. At its core, the power of habit teaches that habits are the invisible architecture of our lives. They shape personal behavior, organizational culture, and even societal movements. Every habit follows the habit loop of cue, routine, and reward. When the brain begins to crave the reward, the loop becomes automatic, creating powerful routines that influence both small daily actions and major life outcomes. Charles Duhigg shows that habits aren't destiny. Through the golden rule of habit change, individuals can replace routines while keeping cues and rewards intact. Willpower itself is a trainable habit, and focusing on keystone habits can create ripple effects that transform other behaviors. Organizations thrive when leaders identify and reinforce key routines, especially during moments of crisis, leveraging social and collective habits to drive widespread change. Beyond the personal and organizational level, habits operate in communities and society. Social habits, reinforced by networks and shared norms, can sustain movements, shape consumer behavior, and influence large-scale outcomes. At the same time, understanding the neurology of free will reminds us that while habits govern much of what we do, conscious awareness allows us to intervene, make choices, and redirect our behavior. The transformation promised by this book is profound. By understanding how habits work, you can regain control of your routines, make better decisions, and influence not just yourself, but the people and systems around you. Whether you want to break bad habits, cultivate positive ones, or create lasting change in your workplace or community, this book provides the tools and insights to do so. Key takeaway: influence isn't about forcing change, it's about understanding the cues, cravings, and routines that drive behavior, and designing environments and habits that work for you rather than against you. Habits, when understood and harnessed, become your most powerful leverage for personal, organizational, and societal transformation. Personal reflection. Reading The Power of Habit completely shifted the way I view daily behavior. I realized that so much of what I do, both productive and unproductive, is driven by invisible habit loops. By identifying cues and rewards, I began replacing small negative routines like mindless scrolling on my phone with constructive ones, such as reading or journaling. One real-life example: I used to grab sugary snacks whenever I felt stressed at work. By analyzing the habit loop, I identified the cue, stress, and the reward, relief or comfort, and replaced the routine with a short walk and deep breathing exercises. Over time, my cravings shifted and the habit stopped controlling me. This experience reinforced Duhigg's point: willpower alone isn't enough. Restructuring the habit is what creates lasting change. On a broader scale, observing organizations around me, I noticed how keystone habits, like daily team check-ins or morning planning routines, improve overall performance, communication, and accountability. Understanding social habits also helped me see the subtle ways communities influence decisions, from peer pressure to workplace culture. Ultimately, the book gave me both a lens and a toolkit: a lens to recognize habits in myself and others, and a toolkit to intentionally design habits that support long-term goals. It's empowering to realize that even when routines feel automatic, we always have the capacity to intervene and redirect them. Takeaway: awareness and small, deliberate changes to habits can create transformations far larger than expected, personally, professionally, and socially.
Critical analysis. The power of habit excels at translating complex neuroscience and behavioral psychology into practical, actionable insights. Its strongest point is the habit loop framework: cue, routine, reward, which makes the science of habits tangible and immediately applicable. Duhigg's use of vivid real-world stories, from Alcoa's safety transformation to the Montgomery bus boycott, provides compelling evidence of how habits operate at individual, organizational, and societal levels. This storytelling makes abstract concepts memorable and actionable. However, the book has limitations. While Duhigg emphasizes habit formation and change, some data examples are dated, and the heavy reliance on anecdotal evidence can occasionally oversimplify the science. Additionally, critics argued that the book underplays genetic, environmental, and socioeconomic factors that influence behavior, making habit change seem universally achievable, when in reality, systemic constraints can limit options. There is also a bias toward corporate success stories, which may not fully represent struggles faced by ordinary individuals. Despite these shortcomings, the book's unique value lies in bridging research and real-world application, offering practical strategies that are flexible across contexts. For example, the focus on keystone habits provides a clear method to prioritize actions that have disproportionate effects, while the integration of social habits emphasizes the power of community in sustaining change. Takeaway: while not flawless, the power of habit remains a highly practical guide to understanding and reshaping behavior. Its core insight, that awareness and intentional habit design can drive profound change, offers a framework for both personal transformation and organizational success that few books match. If you found this summary valuable, thank you for watching and taking the time to explore the science of habits with me. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. I'd love to hear which habit-changing insight impacted you the most. I post 3 book summaries every week, breaking down powerful ideas into actionable steps for personal and professional growth. By understanding the mechanics of habits, cues, routines, rewards, keystone habits, and social influences, you can take control of your daily behavior, improve productivity, and even influence the world around you. Implementing just a few of these strategies can lead to transformations in your personal life, your workplace, and your community. Thanks again for watching, and have an amazing day filled with positive habits and progress.